Hey everyone, it's Soul here, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. The Dark Pictures Anthology is a series of mini-games from Supermassive Games that I haven't really spoken a lot about here on this channel, at least not as much as I probably should, considering just how much I love and appreciate these games. With them being a sort of spiritual successor to Until Dawn, which is by far one of my top 3 favorite games ever, I have followed these games for years, and like many others of you out there, I've been following every single drop of news pertaining to the second season's release. Yet, while I love and adore these games, I have to admit, I am really upset that after the official release date trailer, after we finally got an official day that the game would be released, they decided to push back the game yet again. Directive 8020 was supposed to come out on October 2nd, 2025. This was supposed to be an analytical video breaking down the game's story. I should have played the game 3 or 4 times by now, and I am just severely upset with this delay. However, despite all of my frustrations, it did get me thinking, what is the current state of the Dark Pictures Anthology before the release of the second season? And the answer, well, it's not great. There's definitely a lot of mixed feelings about these games online, but for one reason or another, there is just a lot of hesitancy as we approach the second season's release. So let's take a look back at the first season of the Dark Pictures Anthology and analyze why it's probably for the best that this second season got delayed. Before we jump in though, please remember to hit that like button, click subscribe to see more videos from me, follow me over on Twitch, and leave a comment down below. Here is your one and only warning, that this video contains spoilers. Alright, grab your bowler hats, keep your eye on that raven, and let's sprint into it. On August 28, 2015, Supermassive Games would go on to launch a game that would break through not only the world of horror games, but the entire world of gaming at the time. Until Dawn found massive success in the world of the YouTube Let's Plays during what I like to call the golden days of YouTube gaming.
Hey, how's it going, bros? My name is PewDiePie.
Top of the morning to you, ladies. My name is Jacksepticeye. Welcome to Until Dawn.
Hello, everybody. My name is Markiplier, and welcome to Until Dawn.
It gained popularity with its decision-based gameplay, well-written story, intriguing characters, and a well-executed twist in the plot, taking it from cheesy cliches to a creature of terror, leading many to continue watching multiple Let's Players' reactions.
Oh, no. Oh, my God. See, I knew it.
I told you, run, bitch! Triangle! Hands! Oh my god!
Quick time. Quick time. Hannah, she's lost a lot.
Triangle. Clear.
Good one. Good one.
Oh, my gosh. Bruh, don't give me a choice.
Go right, go right, go right, go right.
Sorry.
Okay, alright.
These Let's Play days of YouTube, the daily uploads, they were all working overtime, and every single gaming YouTuber ever seemed to be playing this game. It even went on to seemingly encourage non-gamers to create gaming channels at this time as well.
I didn't realize you can't use Bluetooth with your PS4, because I don't game.
For a smaller company like Supermassive Games, who, while they had some success, namely with Little Big Planet, nothing else that they worked on ever came close to this career-changing success that Until Dawn brought them. As any company would, they immediately began working on ways to capitalize off of this, firstly, with the sort of Easter egg sequel of Until Dawn Rush of Blood that was promoted in tangent with the PSVR in 2016. It's not a true sequel in any narrative sense, however, with all of the monsters and the settings from the Until Dawn universe being in virtual reality, it definitely brought forward its own version of success. Next came the release of The Inpatient in 2018, which was a prequel to the events of Until Dawn, taking place at the Blackwood Pine Sanatorium. However, during all of these releases, and the release of Supermassive's less successful psychological horror, The Hidden Agenda, as well as a somewhat failed shooter game titled Bravo Team, it was soon revealed that they were hiding a bit of a secret. They eventually broke the news that the Dark Pictures Anthology, a series of standalone decision-based horror games that were a spiritual successor to Until Dawn with the same basic premise of trying to keep our core cast of characters alive through one night of pure terror, was eventually announced. And on August 30th, 2019, almost exactly 4 years after the release of Until Dawn, the Dark Pictures Anthology, The Man of Medan, first came out. The Man of Medan follows the story of a group of friends chartering a boat out in the Pacific to go diving at a wrecked plane. They are then suddenly attacked by some pirates searching for something believed to be at the ship that the wrecked plane came from, something called Manchurian gold. During this stormy night, the group find the ghost ship and immediately climb aboard. With the pirates looking around for the gold, our group escape their makeshift prison cell, and as they get lost and separated on board, they soon start to see a lot of weird stuff chasing and attacking them on board this ship. However, after finding some of the notes and clues on board, or finding the gold itself, it's soon revealed that the Manchurian gold is actually a bunch of chemicals that were acquired during World War II by the US Navy that sadly, when released on this stormy night, went on to cause hallucinations. The group have actually just been fighting, and depending on how you play the game, in some instances, killing each other instead of the monsters that they think they saw. By dawn the next day, they are either rescued by Conrad, who successfully escaped earlier, by the military, if you are able to call them by radio, by escaping on the boat the Duke of Milan, or, in probably the most morbid ending in the entire series, they are stranded on the boat with no one coming to rescue them, causing the group, depending on their relationships to the other characters, to either stay behind with Alex, or drift on the broken boat with Fliss back to shore, presumably resulting in all 5 of our characters' demise. This was, at the surface, a pretty strong start to a new chapter within the world of Supermassive success. Sales were great, the game instantly turned a profit basically overnight, and while the Let's Play days of YouTube were definitely changing and adapting at this time, this game's tie to the Until Dawn success and the sort of golden days of YouTube made the Let's Players have a bit of a resurgence. However, the signs of this series' shortcomings was already there. Man of Medan, despite getting so many sales within that first month, ended up getting a hefty amount of what I'll call low-level disappointment. Reviews were generally positive. There was a few minor issues that people had, some disagreements of course, but there was one main thing that disappointed a lot of players and in some cases caused them to never come back to the series again. And that was the fact that the plot was simply too predictable.
We started off in the prequel on the boat, now it's like, oh, he's hallucinating, don't stab him, it's your friend, the kid with a knife. We never found out if it actually was, but I immediately called it that it was hallucinations. And then to find out that it actually was towards the end, I'm a little bit disappointed. Does that make sense? I didn't expect to be right away, because Until Dawn was so good at like misleading me, and then at the end being like, no, this is it, and I would be like, wow! And this game is just like, oh, that's it, and it was it. And it's like, there's nothing else? Are there like any other twists you're hiding from me? No, that's it?
The game makes the Manchurian Gold being a bioweapon much too obvious with this spark of lightning, the fog rolling out of these containers, and of course, the characters' hallucinations getting stronger and stronger the longer that they are exposed on board the ship. We all saw it coming, and it made the threat to our characters' lives much less serious. It also led a lot of people to probably save a lot more characters than they would have if they weren't already guessing that it was this poisonous hallucinogenic fog. The characters in the plot itself also received some slight pushback, as there were those that found the characters to be a bit uninteresting, and the plot didn't feel as nicely strung together or in-depth as Until Dawn. Now, on one hand, it is entirely understandable, since it is a shorter game, that it's not going to be perfectly tied up with a nice little bow in the same way that Until Dawn was. However, with this being the first of these games and the first real feeling successor to Until Dawn, it made it really difficult to not compare it to its predecessor.
Here's my thoughts. This game wasn't good. Now, what I'm saying as the experience of Man of Medan was pretty okay. I appreciate the ambition of what it tries to do, but it seems weird considering we already have something to compare it to, which is Until Dawn. And the experience of Man of Medan, even though it's coming 4 years after the fact, is less than Until Dawn was.
This is one of those games that, in my opinion, has gotten worse in hindsight, as every single time I go back to it, I find the characters less and less intriguing, let alone likable. There is nothing going on in this game's plot to make you care about these characters and get you truly connected to them. Conrad has some amount of wit that's enjoyable, but if you're able to have him escape earlier, well, there goes your most entertaining character for the entire game. Fliss, despite being set up as more of a minor character out of the 5 based on this intro scene here, goes on to become our sort of main character throughout this game, as we see her multiple times over and over again, going back to try and save the group. She is the one pulling them out of these hallucinations, and is quite possibly the smartest person within this entire group. However, with her backstory having the potential to be something intriguing, they don't elaborate on why she needs to lie about her license outside of this one conversation, and is never made a true point of conflict between the trust of our characters.
How experienced are you?
Excuse me?
I mean, I know what your fake credentials say, but I don't know the truth.
Were you snooping around? You don't trust me?
Alex and Julia, despite beginning the game by getting engaged, they don't really have a solid relationship. We have to take the fact that they are a couple at their own words, because they never truly show us any amount of the chemistry that these two characters have. There's not some fun, crazy, dramatic relationship problems that are occurring either to keep our interest on this couple. The only character trait that we get out of these two is the fact that Alex's concern over money keeps getting brought up. And it honestly, after I played it more and more, comes across as more of an annoying, complaining child, rather than a true, sincere insecurity. Brad, being the nervous, nerdy character, is probably our most grounded character and the most enjoyable one to follow, as he has the tiniest amount of a bravery character development, but that's really it. It's nothing too dramatic, it's not a drastic character arc, and that's the full extent of our 5 main characters. The plot doesn't help to hide the fact that these characters are so flat either, because there's no subplot going on. We're not getting any other information, and with the main plot being so transparent, it just makes this very flat, boring, and disconnected in my opinion. However, fans of the game have pointed out that the atmosphere is enjoyable, and while it might not be my slice of cake, I'm sure there's quite a lot of you that appreciate this ghost ship story. One thing that this game does incredibly well, however, is the fact that they have so many unique endings to this story. It is definitely the game with the most unique different outcomes out of the entire Dark Pictures anthology. And for that, it definitely deserves a huge round of applause. Branching storylines are always difficult to navigate from any writer or developer's standpoint, so the fact that they were able to get all of these different outcomes and change the ending confrontational moment is a huge win in terms of the butterfly effect storyline they're going for. So despite this game being a pretty good success and a solid start to the series, the cracks were already showing. And for some people, those cracks were enough for them to stop playing this series. However, for the people that stuck around, be it the long-term fans of Supermassive, casual horror gamers, or narrative gamers, we were all looking forward to the next release within the series, titled Little Hope, that was shown at the end of Man of Medan, and was set to be released in 2020. As Little Hope begins, we get an intro scene with a character by the name of Anthony, who witnesses his entire family being burned alive after some suspicious activity from his younger sister Megan, before he ultimately runs in there as well, resulting in the entire family being killed from this tragic fire. After this intense intro, we then cut to the present day. As we witness a school bus crash, we awake as our main character of Andrew, who appears to be on a school trip with his Professor John and classmates Angela, Taylor, and Daniel. However, they all look identical to the family that was burned in the fire at the intro. As they enter into the town of Little Hope, they are seemingly stalked and watched by Megan's mysterious double Mary, who appears to drag the group to the events of the past where they witness the witch trials that occurred in this town. However, as they all take a look around them, they realize that these people that are on trial look identical to the people in their group. And when their past version is killed, they are then pursued by a twisted monster version of their past self during the events of present day. As they find photos of themselves yet again scattered across the town, this time from the 70s, the group try to figure out what is going on as they split up, regroup, and are constantly bumping into this mysterious old man, before all of a sudden, they find themselves back at the burnt down house that we saw in the beginning. It's here in our final flashback as our group is trying to avoid their terror-filled doubles that have chased them to this house that Andrew has to tell his past double to either condemn Megan/Mary as a witch, or if you were able to find all of the clues in town, you could save her life by revealing that the true occultist was actually the priest. As Andrew comes back to reality, chaos will ensue in a moment as some characters, depending on their locked personalities that you somehow gained throughout your gameplay, will instantly be killed within the house before it's revealed in one ending or another that Andrew is really Anthony, the bus driver who watched his entire family burn in that house at the very beginning. And all of this, the entire night's events, was a twisted hallucination. The most common ending is where you have some survivors and then get swept away in a police car only to realize that Andrew is Anthony. But in a few alternate endings, we see him ready to take his own life before either he's successful or perhaps Megan or this mysterious man who is revealed to be Vince, Tanya's boyfriend, will go on to stop him and save his life. Before its release, Little Hope gained immediate interest among many for a few different reasons. The Salem witch trial-styled time travel plot that was shown in the trailer was something that seemed to get a lot of people immediately interested. The fog in this abandoned town had some wondering if it was perhaps a nod to Silent Hill, and of course, the iconic eyebrows of the talented actor of Will Poulter starring as our guest actor for this game. It just made a lot of people pay extra attention to it. With the demo getting a lot of attention, this game was looking promising and people were highly anticipating it. And when the game eventually came out, people were absolutely loving the classic spooky ghost town story that this game provided, with the intriguing twist and mystery that the witch trials created. Not to mention, the jump scares, in my opinion, are the best in the entire Dark Pictures anthology, creating for some really memorable scares.
Está hablando de que alguien
¡Se acercó la madre!
Is this like the witch trial?
I didn't say I was. Jesus Christ!
Get off of me!
The game was immensely well received for majority of the gameplay experience. Sadly, however, it loses a lot of people with its ending. The initial reactions that people had was fairly harsh. A lot of people did not like having this ending. The characters dying from seemingly random decisions earlier without knowing what decisions were important made a lot of players feel like the QTEs and everything they were doing was basically pointless. It felt unfair, and even for decision-based gameplay, it just felt confusing.
The way I am interpreting this, perhaps biased, is that by saving most of them, you made that one screw up with the girl where he missed the swing, and she seemed to die there. But they all made it to the end. And then they all got killed and there was nothing we could do.
Very obvious that's what it was. Red herrings. It just means that like almost everything is
literally everything in the story doesn't matter. There were no stakes at any point. No one was in danger. Like what
him dying doesn't mean anything. Like Daniel dying means nothing.
So apparently the choices I made gave everyone bad character traits, or at least not good enough. And that is what killed them in the end. Like, Angela was completely my mistake, but I didn't expect, like, their character traits to be, like, the thing that condemns them.
Now, of course, that topic has been debated since this game's release, as many people will go on to say that that's how the butterfly effect should be. That's just how it works. Any and all decisions, no matter how small, will go on to have this rippling effect in the events that unfold. However, in my opinion, this execution just felt very unfair. And to make matters even worse, immediately after this harsh murder scene where we lose the characters that we fought so hard to keep alive, we are then hit in the face with this "it was all just a dream" type of ending where the characters are revealed to be fictions of the tormented mind of our main character. While these two disappointments were enough to turn people away from this series on their own, it gets even worse because of the fact that this is coming immediately after Medan, where we had yet another all of the threats are fake type of ending. Everything is just a hallucination. There is no real threat to our characters at all in either one of these stories. And the fact that these two games are the first two released in the series is something that I will forever say was a huge mistake and oversight on behalf of the developers behind the Dark Pictures anthologies. Now, I have to admit that I do have a soft spot for this game. I really enjoyed this game, even though I acknowledge it has quite a few problems. Any game that combines horror with psychology, I think just will automatically have a soft spot in my heart. And Anthony's story of being constantly haunted by the deaths of his family, watching them die over and over again in his mind, shows the full extent of torture that grief can truly cause someone. But putting my feelings aside and putting aside the emotions that this story is trying to create here, this game has quite a few problems to it. The biggest one, in my opinion, being that we end up playing as characters that aren't there when Andrew isn't there himself.
What happened? I heard voices.
It just doesn't make sense for us to be able to play as Taylor or Daniel when Andrew isn't even in the room with them. They exist solely within his tormented mind, and yet, here we are, miles away from him, standing, having full-on conversations and complex conversations at that, between two characters that aren't there. The reality is, the creators probably only kept these scenes in an attempt to create that co-op multiplayer feature that they were really trying to push forward with these games. However, while it's a cool concept, they shouldn't have added it into this particular story purely because of the fact that this is all happening within our main character's mind. Another issue that this game faced was that the plot was a bit confusing. A lot of people wound up ending this game confused as to what the heck was going on with the witch trials and how that plays into everything. There's a lot of aspects to this story that, in my opinion, make it a lot better when you know the full context. However, ultimately it ends up leaving you very confused at the end of your first playthrough. As for the characters themselves, they do go on to face the common criticism that every single one of the Dark Pictures Anthology games will go on to face, which is the issue of the characters not necessarily being developed enough for people's liking. While I personally do find the bickering between John, Angela, and Taylor to be a bit more enjoyable than Alex's complaining in Man of Medan, these characters still don't really have character arcs. There's no true development, and while there is this overarching mystery of what is going on, the characters themselves don't really add too much to it, aside from Taylor and Daniel's weird relationship. Now, this romantic relationship isn't really weird for much of the game. I think most players do end up rooting for this couple. However, it turns immensely weird at the realization that these two are Anthony's brother and sister. They are siblings. So why is he now imagining them as a couple? It's definitely just a weird why is this included type of moment. The one character, however, that I feel does have the most impactful development to him, if you could really call it a development, would have to be John and the fact that he is constantly struggling with his sobriety. This stems from, of course, Anthony's traumatic past and the fact that his father was an alcoholic. Depending on how you play it, you can either give in to his alcoholism or you can stand strong in his sobriety, and I just personally really like that detail to his character. However, aside from that, the characters are still, sadly, very flat within this game, and only adds yet another reason as to why so many people end up disliking this story. After 2 games in a row having fake enemies where the threat is not truly there, it was really hard not to look back at just how amazing Until Dawn was, with the reveal of there being a real monster chasing after our group. It wasn't just Josh and his messed up pranks. It wasn't just this mysterious man in the woods stalking every single character. There was a real danger to our characters' lives in the form of the Wendigo. And the lack of monsters and the lack of a true life threat to the characters within both of these stories was becoming a huge issue. This game was sadly a lot of people's final game in the series. I've noticed it in the comment section here on my own channel, as well as across the internet, that this was a major final moment or step down for a portion of the fans. So many people did not look back. And those of us that stayed behind, that were looking forward to seeing what happens next, it's sad to say, but a lot of us had a lower sense of expectations going into the next game. Which honestly is a bit of a shame because on October 22nd, 2021, my personal favorite game in the entire Dark Pictures Anthology was released, and sadly, it wasn't really received with open and awaiting arms. House of Ashes takes place in 2003, and it follows a group of US soldiers in Iraq who were sent on a secret mission to find a hidden stash of chemical weapons. However, as their mission begins to go wrong, all of a sudden, be it from an earthquake or something more sinister, the earth cracks open and all of our characters fall into the ruins of this Sumerian temple. It's here, as they try to regroup while under the constant threat of being attacked by their enemies, that they go on to lose their fellow soldiers to some mysterious and terrifying creatures hiding in the dark. We play not only as 4 US soldiers, but also as one from the Iraq patrol named Salim, as we eventually go on to get these 2 different armies to set aside their differences and work together to try and survive these monsters. As our now united group decide to try and stand their ground, right as they think they know everything they need to know about fighting off these creatures, a grotesque humanoid mutation suddenly appears in front of them. This, depending on your choices in the beginning, will either be one of the temple guards or the invading Akkadian soldier from the intro scene. With this creature's terrifying speed and strength, our group are swiftly separated. Rachel is forced to confront her relationship problems, as you, the player, can either decide for her to mend her past issues with her husband Eric, or to end things with him for good in order to be with her lover Nick. Meanwhile, Jason and Salim have been traveling further and further down these mysterious tunnels as they go on to discover what these creatures are. And they are not of this planet. An alien spaceship has crashed and is buried 3,500 feet underground. As you explore this area further, it's revealed that these creatures aren't even the aliens themselves, but aliens that are infected with some sort of alien parasite, resulting in this creature's form. When infected in the humans, it causes them to live forever in this twisted mutation. As the group reunites, they decide to try and destroy these creatures by destroying their cocoons before our group have to make a mad dash to the surface. Yet, right as you think they are safe in the sunlight, an eclipse suddenly happens and you have to survive a sudden onslaught of attacks before our survivors can finally go home safely. Except, not really, because it's soon revealed during the credits scene that all of the soldiers that survive are interrogated by the US government, kept under lock and key. With many disappointed in the previous games, House of Ashes had an initial sales dip of about 27%. People just weren't so willing to give it a shot. I also, in my experience, found that this game just wasn't advertised nearly as much as previous ones. Now, of course, it could just be a mishap with the algorithms that either got missed on my end or on their end, but I did not hear really anything about this game. And I find it interesting that myself and others did not know about this game's release, at least not right away. My personal theory is that they were probably just distracted working on the release of the Quarry. Maybe they ran out of a budget to actually put a lot of money into the marketing of it. I don't really know. But either way, a lot of people did not buy this game when it first came out. However, since the game's release, and with time going on and on, more people have gone back and bought this game, so much so that according to the Steam stats, House of Ashes now matches the amount of sales as Little Hope, while The Devil in Me, the grand finale to Season 1, is sitting at about 100,000 less than House of Ashes. To me, this combination of a lack of initial sales followed by an increase in sales only confirms the fact that this game, despite people liking it, just wasn't really marketed well enough. I know for me personally, if it wasn't for Jacksepticeye's playthrough, I wouldn't have known that this game actually came out because I simply wasn't hearing anything about it. But marketing aside, word did eventually get around about this game's release, and more importantly, people were saying that it was actually pretty good. This game went on to reinstill people's hopes within the Dark Pictures Anthology series as it stood out amongst the others.
I'll tell you right now, out of all the, I guess, Dark Pictures games, this is the one I actually really want to go back and try to play again. Maybe not right now, but I wouldn't mind getting like the alternate endings or alternate choices.
The final act of this game was so cool, though, man.
It was all worth it. It was all worth
it. It's so long. Dude.
No,
I was so excited and happy every time we did some crazy shit.
And then it was like, we just got out of a frying pan and into a larger fire.
Yeah. Oh man.
Yeah, that I think that one was my favorite. I honestly think that's up there with Until Dawn for me.
It's up there.
For the first time ever, unlike the previous two games, the issues that people had with this game was more of a difference in taste, style, and preferences, rather than there being one bad thing that everyone agrees on. The issue of the endings in the first two games is non-existent within this story, and in fact, it goes on to do the opposite, as the final act within this game has often been praised by multiple players. There is a lot to love about this game. This is the first game where we get real monsters chasing after our characters. It's not some fiction of someone's imagination here. There is a real dangerous threat to the characters' lives. And this, being the first monster story since Until Dawn, had a lot of people very excited. The characters themselves are not only improved compared to the two previous games, but they're actually developed complex characters. All 5 of our main characters have strong, prominent personalities that, in some cases, go on to have true character arcs. Jason's story is, in my opinion, the best written character in the entire Dark Pictures anthology because of how they are able to manage his optional character arc, depending, of course, on how the player chooses to play him. Watching this rough, tough, sometimes racist military guy reveal the fact that his entire persona of being in the Marines to honor the dead that passed during 9/11 was built on a lie, and then seeing how he moves forward after revealing that truth to Salim is hands down the best scene in the entire game.
This bullshit. I'm not here to honor the dead. The truth is, my life was going nowhere fast. I jumped at the chance to sign up.
We all have our reasons. They don't have to be profound.
Profound, huh? Those towers were hit. I was stoned out of my fucking skull. I didn't even hear about it till a week later. How's that for profound?
And while I'm not trying to do a full breakdown of why this game is great, I just have to point out the attention to detail the writers put into this character here, as we see Jason go on to use his iconic I can hear you thinking line that he's been doing the entire game with Nick, now using it with Salim, showcasing their newfound connection and brotherhood in this moment. Salim, the fan favorite for this game, is our morally good character who acts as a great foil to Jason. While he is always the first one willing to drop his weapons and be honest with his enemies, he is also not a character that you could just walk all over, as we go on to see him fight back against both Jason, Eric, and the group if you go for the more violent actions. While Jason and Salim are arguably the 2 best characters within this entire game, the love triangle trio go on to add a much-needed sense of romance and drama, with characters that are so enjoyably messy. Rachel, having had an affair with Nick, while her and her husband Eric have been apart for about a year or so, goes on to cause a lot of drama or even fights depending on what you pick throughout the entire gameplay experience.
That's the best you got?
Stop it!
Now, some people have criticized this, saying that it's annoying, it's not necessarily the most well-written, and while there are some times that the game does try to steer you in the direction of choosing Nick instead of Eric, taking away the feeling of it being entirely up to you to decide, I absolutely love the fact that there is this hidden scene that so many players will go on to miss that ends up revealing so much about these characters.
I'm more than capable of looking after myself. Now get your feet off my dash, you hillbilly.
Not to mention, the setup of these character stories is really well done since we are dropped in the middle of this mystery. This is a great writing tactic here where we are dropped in not knowing anything else, and it forces us to pay even more attention to these characters as we try to figure out what happened in their past and how we can even begin to move forward with this.
You're always a good guy. Maybe too good for me.
Have you forgotten what this ring means to me?
Right off the bat, Eric, Rachel, and Nick, they are all broken characters, be it from their past relationships with each other, or in Nick's case, his recent past history and his guilt about the checkpoint. All of these characters are complex. They aren't two-dimensional for the first time in these games, and while yes, there are still people that want these characters to be even more developed, I personally feel that for a game of this length, these characters and their personalities are just perfection. I could honestly talk about these characters forever, but for the sake of this video, we will move on to other promising aspects within this game. One thing that the game does incredibly well that is lacking within the previous two games is the addition of intriguing side characters. Unlike the obviously evil pirates within Man of Medan, and unlike Vince in Little Hope, who really just follows us around the whole time, here we have more memorable side characters in the form of the fellow soldiers. They aren't just memorable in their unique personalities, but their conversations actually carry a certain weight to them that goes on to impact all of our characters. And the main one out of the group has to be Clarice. We have the opportunity with Clarice to have some heavy conversations between her and Rachel that are entirely optional and go on to reveal more about Rachel's character. Not to mention, Clarice at the end of the game, depending on your choices earlier, could go on to attack the group if she was left alive, only adding to the decision-based butterfly effect storytelling that these games are trying to focus on. The fact that the writers gave this time and attention to all of these side characters here is, in my opinion, what makes this game feel a lot more full and complete within this short story. With the combination of it being real monsters and real stakes within this story, with the final moment of confrontation being a mad fight for survival, and with the credit scene being similar to the Until Dawn interrogation as well, this game is probably the closest that we will ever get to a true spiritual successor within this series. But with all of this praise, the game is definitely criticized for not having that many endings out of all three of the Dark Pictures games so far. There really isn't a difference in these endings at all, but rather a feeling of who can you keep alive. It also is sadly a game that is very unpolished. Now, the Dark Pictures anthologies have been coming out every single year. They were doing an annual release for these games, and with this game in particular, that rush and those tight deadlines were really starting to have a negative effect on the quality of the game's release. The Dark Pictures anthology, to this point, has always had some minor technical issues. There's a lot of random one-off frames in between the transitional scenes that you can catch if you are quick enough with the pause button that really should have been edited out in post-production here, but sadly were missed. But with this game in particular, it's not just those minor technical issues, it's also not the issue of graphics, which we sometimes see take a bit too long or cause some issues with texture. My main issue here is the fact that there are a lot of times where it feels like the lines were just dropped. Perhaps this is because they are doing a branching storytelling game, but it just sort of feels that a lot of lines were dropped and these scenes didn't end in time. There's a lot of lingering frames, some awkward pauses that don't really feel like they should be there, that go on to negatively affect the dialogue, which is really such a shame in my opinion, because I think the contents of the story are so well done. So to have all of these awkward pauses just really goes on to hinder the experience of this game. It was here, with all of these growing mixed feelings that these games were creating, that many people were openly questioning if they would want to continue playing these games. It's hard to continue playing them when there just kept being new issues popping up every single time. Sure, this game had a better plot, it had real monsters, but it was rushed and unpolished, so what next? What would be the next bad thing to come within this series? We'd have to wait a little while to find out though, because before we would get the next Dark Pictures game, Supermassive would go on to release The Quarry, and while it didn't quite stick the landing beautifully, as a full game and as the official successor to Until Dawn, not just a spiritual successor, it still hit some incredibly high scores and rekindled a lot of people's attention and interest within this style of games, just in time for the release of the Dark Pictures Anthology finale, The Devil in Me. In the grand finale of Season 1, we follow a group of colleagues who work under Charlie Lonnet at his production studio, where they are currently putting together a piece about H.H. Holmes, a famous murderer in the US, often called the first serial killer. After being invited to this mysterious island by a Mr. Grantham Dumet, who has recreated H.H. Holmes's murder mansion, the group, despite all of their personal drama and sarcasm, are all looking forward to filming their project at this location. But with Dumet acting sketchy, it doesn't take too long for things to go awry on this trip, as it's swiftly revealed that the recreation is too perfect, with them being tossed into this mansion of death traps that's being controlled not by the person they thought was Dumet, but this mysterious masked man instead. With first Aaron and then Charlie narrowly escaping death, the group are forced to think quick to try and outsmart these traps, or simply just get lucky, as the game will go on to toss players in and out of chase scenes and quick-time events as this mysterious man pursues the group. Kate, Aaron, and Jamie do go on to try, but sadly fail, to flip the script in this desperate attempt to trap this man in his own maze of moving walls. And as the girls flee Dumet with him hot on their tails, the boys make their escape from the mansion. Eventually, after making their way across the island and finding multiple horrific sights along the way throughout their evening, the group are finally reunited. But it doesn't take long for Dumet to show up. As they arrive at the dock, our team is able to escape only thanks to the distraction of the police officer being killed. Right as they think they are safe out in the open water, Dumet suddenly pops up, revealing that he grabbed onto the boat at the last second. In this final fight to survive, you have to dodge Dumet's attacks and jump into the water to safety before Dumet is caught in this explosive boating accident, presumably killing him for good. With our group then being rescued, and just as we think Dumet's been defeated, we suddenly see a hand grab the mask, picking it up once more, before a post-credit scene reveals that he continues his murder spree. For the grand finale to Season 1, the game was fairly well received.
I have fun with this one. I liked it.
If I had to rate this one versus all of the other Dark Pictures games, I would actually say that this is within the top... This is definitely top 3 easily for me. I think I liked it more than Man of Medan. Little Hope wasn't the worst. Some people have their own issues with it, but House of Ashes was actually pretty good. And then The Devil in Me. Yeah, I think The Devil in Me might be my favorite Dark Pictures that they've ever released.
I have so much that I want to say about this game. And by say, I mean gush about. I don't know what about this game struck me so hard, but this is hands down the best anthology game that I have played.
A lot of people, presumably still haunted from the first 2 games' endings, were just really excited that we had this murder mansion with a real serial killer. The threats felt more real than ever before, with all of these jigsaw-styled puzzles keeping the players on their toes. But what made this game even more creepy than all of the other ones has to be the twisted and horrific addition of not only the mannequins that look identical to Dumet's victims being posed in how they died, but also the addition of Dumet preserving the bodies of his victims and then transforming them into these horrific animatronics. It is insanely twisted and messed up, but in the best gory and horror-filled way. This game is also the first to take some liberties in relation to the overall gameplay experience. All of the areas were a lot more open and free to explore, with the added addition of being able to climb objects, push objects around, balance across certain boards, and even being able to hide at certain parts of the game. Every single character also goes on to have their own unique item that allows them and only them to progress the story or find certain hidden clues. These few subtle changes made the gameplay experience, despite otherwise being the same, feel new and refreshing. The characters themselves are easily a lot more memorable as their underlying petty and often overly dramatic workplace drama tends to seep into the scenes. But it's not just Charlie's sarcastic and bossy attitude that tends to make these characters even more memorable, but it's the fact that they each have their own little quirks or character traits about them that make them work so well. Charlie is, as I said, bossy, sarcastic, and over the top with an addiction to nicotine that we go on to see him struggle with throughout the game. Erin, while she is our timid and shy character, is forced to fight for herself in order to survive the night as her asthma goes on to flare up, causing her inhaler to become a necessity to live that goes on to add a lot of tension to certain scenes. Mark, our aspirational and successful photographer and videographer, has a severe fear of heights that he's forced to face multiple times throughout the evening. Kate, our star of the show, is revealed to have a lot of issues surrounding her confidence as well as general mental health struggles that go on to result in her panic attacks. She's not only revealed to be in therapy, but she also has an affinity for crystals that go on to help her calm down during your gameplay.
Find your spirit crystal?
Don't do that. And don't make fun of me.
Sorry, wouldn't want you to cut yourself. The rock is sharp as hell and, super magical.
It's an amethyst crystal. It
helps keep you calm by blanketing you in protective energy. I know, I remember.
Then last but certainly not least, Jamie is there to be the voice of rebellious reason, always going against the group, but as the game progresses, proving to be very competent in this state of survival as she goes on to fight for her friends to get them to safety. Unlike the other characters, she is the only one to have no true weakness in the same way the others do. Although her affection for Erin is certainly used against her throughout some of the puzzles.
You're okay now. You're safe.
But it's not just these minor traits that go on to make these characters so much better than where this series started. It's also the fact that the setup of the conflict between the characters is so good. Not only is there petty workplace drama, but we also have a blossoming newfound romance between Jamie and Erin, as well as the recently split conflict between Mark and Kate that goes on to encourage us to find out what happened between these two, as well as to try and save Erin throughout the game. Now, despite all of this praise, this game does have its fair share of issues that players went on to have at the end of their experience.
It's like the usual thing that happens with these games sometimes where like people live but you're not rewarded with any sort of conclusion to their story or character arc or anything, and it just feels dissatisfying. Yeah, I don't know. It was just kind of not great. There wasn't really
I actually enjoyed it a lot. I think the problem that I had with the game overall, audio mixing is a little bit off sometimes, which is fine. More mechanics though, because otherwise the gameplay or like the The way the game was going was very repetitive. Like, oh my god, this plays no power. Let's take the power. Like,
the characters, while still miles ahead of the quality of the character development that we got in the first two games, still sadly isn't great. I personally will forever hold a grudge about the fact that the writers decided to add in Kate's past serial killer trauma, and then it led to nothing. But putting my personal feelings aside, the characters themselves just simply don't have strong developments. The asthma and the fear of heights are cool quirks, but it never truly brings much to the end half of the game, as the stakes become so intense that they outweigh these minor fears. The new items that each character have, while again new, cool, and fun, just don't have a true use or impact throughout the game. You can't really swap items, the characters never really backtrack in a way that has people using specific items, and you also can't swap back and forth between the characters deliberately, specifically for the goal of using their specific items. It just all sort of feels a bit like an unfinished idea as the game went on. The ending to this story is sadly similar to House of Ashes in the sense that it's more of a see who survives type of ending, rather than there being a true change in the story in the sense of the butterfly effect changing the outcome. There's only one different ending, the secret ending with Mark and Kate being kidnapped by Dumet, and them eventually cooperating before getting killed. While the game certainly makes improvements, it also still sadly has those random one-off glitches and dropped shadow frames that this series absolutely loves to have. It's definitely better, but it's still just not quite there. Now, of course, no video game is ever going to please every single player. However, at the end of Season 1 of the Dark Pictures Anthology, there was definitely that remaining low-level feeling of disappointment for every single player that I have seen. Many people found themselves reflecting and taking a look back at the entire series as a whole, only to find that there are so many challenges that these games face. From a writing standpoint alone, the Dark Pictures anthologies are already a huge challenge because of the fact that they are having these branching storytelling games. The fact that they have to think about every single character and how they are changed if one person dies is already a huge task on its own. But that is sadly only the beginning of our challenges here that the Dark Pictures anthology go on to face. The main challenge that they go on to struggle with is the fact that any time they do a butterfly effect story, they will be compared to Until Dawn. While the series may have initially started as a way to expand upon the success of Until Dawn, Supermassive Games is forever haunted by this game's success. Every single game that they make that involves a butterfly effect moving forward is going to be compared to this story. It is sadly inevitable at this point that if they keep making this style of games, they're going to continue getting the same feedback in the sense that it's not as good as Until Dawn. But that being said, I do think that the changes they made in The Devil in Me in relation to the gameplay and the mechanics is a huge step in the right direction to help create a much-needed divide from Until Dawn. Elevating the gameplay to be more involved and intense, rather than purely just decision-based gameplay with a few quick-time events, is a huge difference that will make these games more unique and help stop some of these comparisons. The next major challenge that the Dark Pictures anthology faces, and arguably is the source for every single issue that these games have, is the fact that the runtime for these games is very short. In my opinion, this causes these games to feel like they are biting off way more than they can actually chew because of the short playtime of about 4 to 5 hours for the first 3, and with the finale being at about 6 hours, these games are really just cramming in a lot of content in such a short period of time that when combined with this annual release, resulted in these insanely messy final products. Now, it's already difficult enough to find intriguing ways to help players connect with characters in general, but then when you are trying to do it in such a short period of time, it makes it even more difficult. You're limiting the build-up, the connection, and then the ultimate payoff for every single character because of the short time frame, and this also applies to the plot itself. When you're trying to juggle all of these things, you have to make sure that everything is precise, but that precision is hard to do in a branching storyline, because if you miss one dialogue scene that perhaps changes depending on who is already killed or left alive, that lack of a dialogue moment, that whiplash feeling of a character's emotions, can go on to ruin the player's experience for the rest of the game. Now, of course, not every single character has to have this 5-star character arc or development within the course of a 4.5-hour Let's Play. However, at the very least, I personally think there should be 2 characters out of the 5 that have strong and prominent developments, which is sadly lacking in almost every single one of these games. And this is what I mean when I say that these games are just so insanely tough from a purely writing perspective. But Jacksepticeye goes on to sum up these issues and the frustrating feeling that they create perfectly.
Ugh, I just didn't care about anyone. I'm sorry. It's hard to get involved in the characters when you only know them for a little teeny tiny amount of time, and then shit just starts going wild, and then the killer is like, oh, it's this agent dude that start killing people. It's like, we don't even get to see his face. I don't know who he is. I have no attachment to him. I don't really care. It just seems to be the problem with a lot of these Dark Anthology pictures, is that it's great premise, sloppy execution, and never a very satisfying ending.
And this is a huge thing that Jack has pointed out here. The premise for these games is really unique. There is not another gaming company that is doing anything like this right now. There are no other companies, at least to my knowledge, that are doing the butterfly effect branching storylines within the world of horror in such unique and fun different settings. Supermassive is definitely standing out because of this. However, it becomes increasingly frustrating to continue playing these games when there's always some sort of negative to them. This is why I think so many people are willing to wait for this second season. I know it's frustrating. I am severely upset with this delay, as I mentioned in the beginning of this video, but the fact that these games just feel so unpolished by the end is the main reason that I say it's probably for the best that this game got delayed, in hopes that they are attacking and fixing all of these issues. If these issues are all fixed, if they are able to overcome all of these challenges and polish up any sort of last-minute glitches or shadow frames that keep occurring in the first season, then it will all be worth it. However, I am really concerned and worried about why else this game might have been pushed back due to recent news about staff being let go. On July 22nd, 2025, Supermassive Games released a single statement in which they announced the pushback of the release of Directive 8020, as well as the letting go of about 36 staff members. Now, layoffs are always hard because it's not often that we get to know exactly what happened on the inside. Is it a financial crisis? Is it a corporate greed situation like we are seeing a bit with the Subnautica 2 lawsuits? It's always hard not to think that the delay is directly because of these layoffs. It's severely upsetting to think about, not to mention the talented staff that have been working on this game for years has to leave right at the very end. But as I said, not much is known, or if the staff is even from the team working on the Dark Pictures Anthology. And as I move forward into the next round of games, as I play through Directive 8020, if there are a lot of texture issues, if there are a lot of glitches and things occurring, it's going to be hard not to think about these 36 staff members that were let go and how they could have prevented any and all potential issues. But of course, only time will tell. Those of you that have played these games will have definitely noticed by now that I've left out some key aspects to these games. And don't worry, because it was done intentionally, since these things are, in my opinion, some of the best aspects to the overarching series as a whole. The first, of course, being everyone's fan favorite keeper of the repository, the Curator. At the beginning and end of every story, as well as occasionally throughout the gameplay, the Curator gives us little clues as to the truth of the story, while also providing the connecting narrative for the entire series. We, as this unknown and unnamed player, go into these tales to save these mysterious souls from certain death at the discretion of the Curator. However, as the series progresses, the Curator grows seemingly concerned. By the end of The Devil in Me, he appears startled by something that bangs and shakes on his doors. Who or what could this be? You see, the Curator and his abilities have intrigued so many, as the theories were just running wild in relation to who he is. Could he be a servant to death, perhaps going behind his boss's back to save these souls? Could he be Death himself? Or some have even speculated that he is Dumet, since the outfit matches almost perfectly. The mystery of the Curator is easily one of the top things that made the first season so enjoyable, and is the reason that so many fans of the series are intrigued and excited to see what happens moving forward. The next thing that all 4 games do that works incredibly well and adds a sense of intrigue to the plot is the addition of a hidden second story. When the series first started, Medan gave us the story of what happened to these soldiers in 1947 in these scattered notes. This is not some groundbreaking new tactic. Most video games will go on to have hidden second stories within notes that add to the overall sense of world building and history for our characters. But what I admire about this series is how they decided to adapt this idea and make it more involved within the plot. Little Hope, of course, seemingly merged the past story together with the witch trials and the time travel, perhaps involving the secondary story a bit too much, but it worked within that story they're trying to tell. However, as we get to House of Ashes and The Devil in Me, that's where I feel the writers seem to have figured out this perfect balance for a secondary story. Instead of just finding notes to read that sometimes people will skip over, you are now given a little bit of a cutscene that details a section of the past events. For House of Ashes, it's the events of the archaeologists that first discovered this temple, and then the ultimate betrayal of Bradshaw, resulting in the group's demise. For The Devil in Me, it is the story of Hector Monday and his interviews with the serial killer Manny Sherman that go on to lead Hector to turn to the evil within him and begin his murderous rampage. These secondary stories work as a great subplot to the game, as it gives players a mystery to try and solve, while also encouraging players to truly explore every single space that they are in. However, there is a tiny bit of a downside to this, in particular for House of Ashes here, because these scenes are a little bit of a double-edged sword. Some players found themselves wishing that they played as the archaeologists instead of the Marines, since the action-heavy gameplay just wasn't everyone's slice of cake. However, either way, I do feel that these secondary stories, and the way that they have adapted and been involved throughout the course of this entire series, is something that I feel should continue into the second one. It was really enjoyable to see how they changed and shaped these additional stories across the course of the first season. Then last, but certainly not least, a major highlight to the entire series has to be the multiplayer feature that is both built into the game as well as outside of the game. Due to the nature of these games themselves being so short, many people have gone on to play these games with friends, as it's basically the same amount of time as watching 2 movies.
What is he about to do? What is he about to do?
Hey, if I gotta cut you,
Oh no! No! No, stop! You do that! What? Don't. Are you gonna kill me? Crazy. Oh no!
Rachel!
Wait, so
Yo,
you got the
check
rope?
the bearing. Check the bearing real quick.
Wait, he cut the rope?
Bro, check the bearing!
When playing locally, you can have up to 5 different players that can each take on the identity of one of the 5 main characters, where you then pass off the controller to play as your designated character. You can also play these games online with one other friend, in which the characters are split as well as the decisions, which can actually go on to lead to some new different scenes that we haven't really seen in the main game when you're playing on single player. You also don't even need to use the multiplayer feature because you can always just pause the game and decide with your group of friends while all sitting on the couch working together.
I ain't gonna lie, the game ended here. the game ended here.
This so fucking, oh my god!
I ain't gonna lie to you, the game ended here. The game ended here.
Is he evil incarnate? Like, does he just not die?
The game ended
does
here.
He get stronger the more they get scared?
The game ended here.
These games are, in my opinion, best enjoyed with others around you. The panic of the decisions that you have to make is only intensified, and it just makes the overall experience of the game so much more enjoyable. These being so perfect for a multiplayer experience, however, is actually the reason that the time limit of about 5 hours is going to be so hard to change if that's what they end up doing. You can knock this out in one night as of right now, but if they were to lengthen the story, if they were to make it a lot longer, then the multiplayer feature might be used a little less often. But as of right now, within the first season of the Dark Pictures Anthology, this is the perfect feature to have a fun laugh and a good scare with friends. After all of this, after the lengthy discussion and breakdown of the first season, the questions still remain. How is it that these games will be perceived before the release of the second season? How is it that they are remembered by players right now? And well, it's complicated. These games have received so much mixed feedback that everyone is going to have a different opinion, and not just by a little bit, but by quite a lot. Some people will absolutely look back at these games with nothing but love at the cheesy, enjoyable characters that they got to play with their friends on one scary fun night. Others will look at these games and only see them as flawed. Some people, like myself, will look at these games as fun experiments in the art of storytelling, while others might look at them as a guide on how not to write characters. In the court of public opinion, however, these games are still incredibly successful due to the amount of sales that they continue to get despite all of the mixed feedback. And at the end of the day, in my own personal opinion here, these games are best remembered and taken with a sense of lightheartedness as you go into them just to enjoy the cheesy experience that these horror games have to offer. It never gets tiresome to play these games just to see who you could keep alive. The replayability of these games is great, and while we are definitely heading into the second season on some shaky ground, I am really looking forward to seeing what ends up happening with the second season's release. And I know many of you watching this video are too. So with that, everyone, as always, let me know your thoughts about this series down below. Let's make the comment section a place for everyone to share their opinions. I want to see what all of you that play these games at home actually feel about these games. Because in my research here, I've obviously been watching a lot of streamers and reading critical reviews, but I want to hear from you. So let me know down below what you think. If you made it this far into the video, leave a little star emoji in anticipation for the second season's release, where we will be out in space experiencing the horrors of this alien life form. For those of you that may be new to my channel and are wondering how I would rank these games, I'd have to put Medan in the last place spot due to its poor characters that honestly have kept me bored every single time I've played through these games. Second from last would be The Devil in Me, because even though it has a lot stronger of a writing quality from the first 2 games in the series, I just didn't love it. It's not my cup of tea. It wasn't my style of horror, which is why this is in the 3rd place spot. The 2nd place goes to Little Hope because of the fact that I really enjoy emotionally driven horror stories like this. Even though I know the ending disappointed a lot of people, I really enjoyed the concept they were going for. Then 1st place goes to House of Ashes because of the true development that we get with all of the characters within this really intriguing setting that created a plot that I just thoroughly enjoyed. But once again, let me know your thoughts about this down below, and if you liked this video, make sure you guys hit the like button, click subscribe to see more videos from me, follow me over on Twitch, and turn on notifications if you want to be notified whenever I post a new video. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I will see you future souls next time. Bye, guys!